Well, good afternoon and a huge welcome to all of you on this wet Thursday afternoon, or certainly from me here in Ely in Cambridgeshire. It's soggy and wet, but welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. And for those of you who may have joined us for the first webinar, Edging into Hybrid Church Part 1, then welcome back. Thank you for joining us for that. We're really thrilled to have you with us. If you weren't with us for that, but you've joined us for the first time today, then a massive welcome to you. Our hope with this webinar today is that serving you in putting this on, working in partnership between the Evangelical Alliance, Churches Together in England and Hope Together, is that actually it would give you some practical tools, some sharing of stories, some equipping, and really fuel for this crazy season we still find ourselves in. A little bit more on that in just a moment. But just say, my name's Rachel Heffer. I serve as Head of Mission at the Evangelical Alliance. And let me ask my friends Ben and Rachel to introduce themselves. Ben, you first.
Yeah, I'm Ben. I'm Principal Officer for Mission and Evangelism at Churches Together in England. And Rachel and I met yesterday in London. So this is kind of hot off the press. And we're really thrilled that we're able to work together as unity movements, recognizing that the work of unity is something that we're all passionate about. Rachel.
I'm not spotlighted. Hi, we're just so thrilled that you could be with us today, and it's been great to work in unity together. We're really passionate about serving the church together, and we're really passionate about serving the church on this particular issue of looking at online church. Some of this has come out of key research that we've done that showed the impact of the church going online at this time, and we really want to be able to carry on and do that together so that people can, and particularly new people, can find out about this.
Thanks, Rachel. So in part 1, we spoke to Matt from Big Church in Dallas, looking at how he'd navigated 10 years of looking at online church. We heard from Adrian Semerini, talking about grassroots level, how they'd got started. And we heard from Joe Cox-Darling as well, looking at actually the digital opportunities and the challenges that come with that. Today, we've got 3 brilliant speakers who we'd love to introduce you to, and Ben will tell you about those in just a moment. But first of all, I guess just to say that we really hope that today will serve you. As we said, ongoing challenging times, all different contexts that you're in, the different hats that you wear, the different church backdrops. And we recognise that this is a real period, it seems to me anyway, of rehabilitating ourselves, isn't it? Back into culture, back in society, edging out. And of course, for the church and as church leaders, many different questions as to what we do, back into in-person live services, navigating hybrid, what that looks like. And certainly off the back of many of you joining us last time, we had lots of questions as to the how-tos. How do we get started? What cameras do you use? Do we use our phones? How do we do that blended effect of both in-person whilst recognising those in the online presence? And so we just hope that today, from what we hear, you'll have further ideas and inspiration and equipping. And please do continue to put your questions in the chat. But more than anything, we just hope that it will be encouraging, equipping, and really some practical tools that will spur you on into this coming season that we find ourselves in. Ben.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. I think we are all acknowledging that we won't cover every aspect of hybrid church today. And one of the challenges is that there's loads of permutations and technical questions. So we'll try and get to some of them. We're all learning as we go along. Many of us involved in national organizations are thinking about the autumn, the conferences that we're planning and running, and considering how they might run in a hybrid way that doesn't make those who are joining virtually feel like they're being left out. And there's lots of things that the 3 of us are talking about, and I'm sure other denominational leaders too. And we're thinking about part 3 because, as Rachel Jordan Wolfe indicated earlier, that there's some qualitative research around this being done. And so on the 22nd of July, we're going to be looking at mission and hybrid church. And we hope that will be something valuable for many of you to join us in. But today, we're grateful to have 3 wonderful speakers. Ben Elliot, who's the founder of the Church Comms Collective, a peer-to-peer support group for anyone involved in church communications that's grown over these last 12 months or so of lockdown from about 400 members to about 1,200. And so I'm going to be chatting with Ben in a bit. We have Wale Agbaje, who's been working with digital natives and he'll help us think and explore the importance of the digital when working with young adults, but also across all generations, recognizing that everyone really from 9 to 90 is connected in some way. And then finally, it's great to have Richard Battersby, and he'll share his story of making hybrid church work in a rural context where churches had no Wi-Fi and sometimes no electricity. So it sounds a fascinating story. So we look forward to hearing Rachel as she interviews Richard. And we just hope that these speakers will encourage and inspire you and give you some practical help as you look to roll out some of these things in your own context. We're going to use Slido again today. Those of you who were on our first webinar, Slido is a kind of interactive questions app. You don't have to have a smartphone to use it. You just put into your computer, just Google Slido, and our code today is 038702. So I've got it up. I was going to ask myself a question, but I thought we'll wait for everyone. So if you want to ask a question to any of our speakers, what happens, you stick in your question, and you can kind of vote if that's a question that you'd also like to answer. And then the ones at the top will work our way through. Should we pause and should we pray together? Lord, we thank you for the gift of being able to connect together across many parts of England and possibly other countries today, and to listen to one another, to hear stories, to encourage one another as we all navigate new territory of how to be church in a hybrid way. We ask that by your Spirit, you would speak to us and that you would encourage us. In the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, it's really great to have our first guest, Ben Elliot. Ben is the founder of the Church Comms Collective and head of comms at the Well in Sheffield. Ben, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Hey, Ben, great to be here and to be a part of this. I really enjoyed the first session, so looking forward to this part 3. Bring it on.
Yes, this is part 2. Part 3's a bit later on. Ben, tell us a little bit about your role and the context that you work in, and tell us how this last year's been. I mean, it's been a roller coaster for all of us, weird for all of us, but what's it meant for you in your context?
Yeah, great questions. So just by way of background, some people here might know me. I was a CPO before as the head of innovation there. And I've been a part of the church here, the Well in Sheffield, since it planted 5 years ago. And since last summer, I've been here 4 days a week as the head of comms, which is really exciting. The Church Comms Collective itself, I started about 3 years ago. There's obviously Facebook is an amazing place to connect with people. And I decided to try and find a church community of kind of communication supporters, as it were. The only ones I could find were in the US, and the kind of threads that were popping up in there would be, how many guns you're bringing to church this week, and things which weren't quite appropriate for the UK context. So I thought, well, let's try and see if there's some Brits that want to do this. And sure enough, there is. And it's, like you said, it sparked up. It's over 1,300 now during the lockdown. And that ultimately is, I'm just someone trying to do the best I can for my church. And there's lots of other people out there doing that the same in a voluntary or a paid capacity. And it's basically to get each other's backs, pray for one another, share good practice and grow together. So that's how that started. And in terms of this past year, what has just overwhelmed me has been the way in which I've seen that community come together and really just help each other. We're all learning. I'm learning all the time and equip one another. But also, I think just that it felt like there was this, we hit this really hard thing in March last year where Boris told us to stay at home. And but at the same time, there was this excited kind of ignited moment for many of us where we were able to make a first steps into doing digital church. And that actually has reached a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have come into our buildings. And the exciting stage now is how do we actually still reach those guys, as well as you know, as we transition back into meeting in person again, pending everything going to plan and being able to do that in the way we hope we can. So for me, it's been a roller coaster year of trying to share what wisdom I know, and most importantly, bring other people along who know a lot more than I do as well to help us all grow and learn together.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. That's a really helpful little opener to know who you are and what the last year has been like. What do you see are the main kind of opportunities, but also the challenges for churches who've adopting or are hoping to adopt a hybrid model? So what are the opportunities and the challenges?
Sure. I mean, there's huge opportunities, but I guess one of the steps I always take back to is the key thing about good communication is understanding our audiences. And the way that I see our church community is two things. I try to have communication that on one hand reflects the conversations we would have in the cafe and in the sanctuary and in the meeting spaces and cell communities. And then on the other hand, there's the communications that I would have with someone who's never come across the church before, walking past the building. How would I communicate with that person? And we would use slightly different language probably, and we would, it's a different way of going about that. And one of the things pre-COVID was it was quite easy to separate those two things. But COVID caused what I'm calling, I guess, the glass house effect, where church walls were removed and everything is exposed. And in many ways, that's fantastic because it means there's this huge opportunity to be completely ourselves and everyone can engage in whatever capacity. But it also creates some unique challenges in terms of, okay, well, how do we serve the church families well? But how do we also reach the unchurched, the people that we're trying to serve in our communities? Now, I want to stress that every church community is different. Literally, our localities are different. We've got different people where we are. We're facing different challenges. We have different sets of resources. The key thing for me is coming to that audience perspective of what are we trying to do with this form of hybrid church? And this is a question we've been asking ourselves a lot at the Well. So in the morning, we do a live stream only gathering, and the evening since Easter, we've been doing a 7 p.m. in person with social distancing and those kind of elements. Post-July, we're hoping to have morning gatherings again and an evening gathering, with the evening gathering being broadcast so that people can still partake in the evening live stream, and potentially a pre-recorded thing to go out on a Sunday morning for those that want to engage with something on Sunday morning that wouldn't do otherwise. And that the purpose of that as well is we will particularly try and acknowledge the fact that in-person thing does look different from a pre-recorded digital-led church, the way that that's actually formatted and put together. Now, I am not saying for any second that is a model that every church should do. It comes back to our audiences and what we're actually doing in terms of our missional output and where we are. But I think starting out from the bottom up of understanding that and taking those incremental steps is really beneficial. I'm aware, Ben, that I might waffle, so you might need to.
No. I'm just about to ask you a question. I mean, that's in the. Do you think that the pre-recorded is that really more intentionally for those who might be new to church, and the in-person for those who are already part of the community? Is that how you're thinking about it strategically, or?
Sure. I guess the nature of us in our church context, a gathering. Ultimately, we want there to be the way that our church works. There would be the freedom there to kind of, if we felt prompted to stay and worship for longer, we can do. If it means the word doesn't happen, or other way around, and actually the talk happens and we have a great Q&A or something. But there's those flexibilities which might not translate to someone simply sat at home. When we're solely broadcasting for a viewer, as it were, you can very much shape that content to best, what's the terminology? I guess to further their discipleship journey, if you're very focused in terms of keeping the bits of information concentrated, because people can switch off and go and get a cup of tea or turn over and things. So understanding those two audiences. Now, from our perspective, we've always taken a broadcast approach, whereby we're creating a expression of digital church, which has some form of teaching, prayer, word, and a bit of family news and things. We didn't, with the times we've used Zoom, for example, would have been in more like a church meeting or in a communities type context. Yeah. So from that perspective, the outward kind of broadcasting thing for me is a way in which we've tried our best to open our doors to people outside of the church, because you don't need to be physically present to actually, show your face and be a part of that. But again, that's where it comes down to your audience and the contextualization of actually that might be really important if you're in a rural setting versus the size of our church and being in the heart of a city.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Ben, what challenges have local churches had to date, and how have you helped them overcome that? I mean, has the Creative Comms Church Comms group been useful in helping local churches sort of navigate this?
Yeah, I think we've faced every single problem you could come up with and more, to us, wouldn't you? So I'm not a great techie. I do my best to bumble through. I think there's been lots and lots of questions of literally how do you go about this, OBS and live streaming and different platforms to use. And I'm very blessed to have a guy at church here, David, who is an absolute genius on that. And I'm a big believer in running with the things or learning little bits rather than swamping ourselves in too much and then not being able to do anything well. So we've well and truly used his knowledge to be able to do this. But within the collective, tech stuff has been the big thing. And often actually just a little kind of another useful resource for folk. If you want to search for the Church Tech UK group, if you're on Facebook, that's led by Anthony Lear, who's a lovely guy. And that is very much church tech stuff. Those guys have got some real boffins amongst there. And often actually from the collective will say, look, there might not be someone here to cover that. Check that group out as well. So that's been a big thing, tech. The other thing I think has been actually the simple kind of processes of how we go about this, in terms of actually what's working and what's not. And one of the things I'm all for, and I welcome anybody here to join the Church Comms Collective. It's a free, it's not affiliated to anything. It's just people doing the same thing together. The churchcommscollective.com would have all the links on. But one of the things that's happened there, I guess, is that thing of how do we do these little things and actually find the little routes to help be able to do any of the aspects well. There's been people wanting to know how do I go design? How do I actually edit these things and put together? What should be the good, perfect length for engagement? How do I use TikTok? Is that something I should be using, or should I just stick to Facebook and things? And again, often it comes back to root questions of people understanding, I guess from more of the consultant mind I've got on, of the root objectives of what you're trying to do and not losing sight of that in the process. Yeah,
that's really helpful. One of the questions is, what's the Facebook group that you run? Can you tell us the exact name? So if people are kind of logging onto Facebook, they can go and join up. And you might get some extra people joining out of
the link to it is available via thechurchcommscollective.com, and on there's a link to the Facebook group, and there's further resources that we're looking at actually sharing. Someone, I think Steph's just going to share the actual Facebook group itself for the church tech stuff in the comment section as well.
Great, that's brilliant. We've got a few questions coming in slightly, but I want to ask just a final one before we look at some of these questions. I think they're sort of interrelated. I mean, are you seeing people effectively fully blend the in-person presence with the online? And how do you facilitate that well? I.e. have an online Zoom host to connect with those online and filter what's happening into the building? Are there some about that hybridity, which is, I think, it's for me seems to be really quite complex and difficult to kind of do?
Yeah, do you know what? As I was thinking about this the other day, who else is doing it well, and where do you start when every church is doing it, and every church is doing their best, and that's just wonderful. And that's the thing. I think the old saying of comparison is the thief of joy, of not worrying about how others are doing it too much, and actually, again, serving our context well. I think for us, the thing that we're thinking of doing is, if we have resources to do this, we would love to have a separate camera shot. It might be pre-recorded, or it might be live, but in a separate room within the church to say, those of us joining online, welcome here today. We're a church about this. Tonight, this is going to be happening. And kind of a basic introduction to what a church service is, in case hopefully someone who's not from the church comes along and actually goes, what are they doing now? They're singing the communion. What's that? And actually kind of saying, and then I think there's an ownership which I want to give to our leadership who's there leading the services, to remember that we're going to be live streaming, and just to kind of take a moment to actually think in terms of, I guess more than ever, as we're explaining things, to do it in simple terms. We have our youth kind of kids ministry. We've got so the church is called The Well. We've got an elephant, Welly the elephant, and Welly does a great job at engaging the kids with the word. And what was really interesting, we heard back from yesterday, somebody who's come to faith via they're adults, they've come to faith via the stuff we were doing on the kids channel, because it was so simple and so easy to grasp the gospel. And I think that's something which we have to remember, that people are coming in, often if they are coming in, they might not have any history of understanding this, and it's kind of making taking, I guess, a little more of a simplified approach. Bear in mind that we might have people coming from all sorts of backgrounds. I really hope that all of our churches do have people connecting from backgrounds that have never stepped into these places before, online and in person, for that matter.
That's a really helpful tip, Ben, that idea of actually having someone who's explaining what's happening within the context of the service, especially for people who've got no experience of church, have not been into a church building, and they walk in, it's just so overwhelming and don't know what's happening. So I think that's a really helpful.
We actually have it's a lovely thing to happen where in our area there's definitely a lot of people searching. We've had a lot of new faces come into the church in the past few weeks, and it's just as appropriate for those guys to know. Just so you know, especially with COVID kind of guidelines, if you're the minute, obviously we can't communicate and interact, but actually kind of setting a bit of framework of them being ultimately welcome, loved, and we're glad you're here. And then going on to what does this actually service do? And stopping each stage to say, we're moving now into time of this. And the reason we do this is this. It's just giving it a framework. And I think that will translate well in person and online, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Ben. We've got a few questions on Slido that I'd like to put to you. We'll go backwards actually. There's the first one's from Fiona. She's based in Salisbury at the URC church there. Do you have any way of monitoring how many people tune into your pre-recorded services? And secondly, how do you know if people have accessed them?
Sure. Currently, we don't do any pre-recorded. Ever since the first lockdown, everything we did was live streamed, and we will watch the figures in terms of who's engaging on Facebook and YouTube at the time, and then we can go back into the YouTube Studio and Facebook equivalent to actually see what the figures are on that. So we don't, but if you can easily set up a Google account and have Google Analytics and things like that, and YouTube Studio, which is most common platform for broadcasting and pre-recorded things, will give you insights if you go into the studio tool and go into the analytics setting.
Do those tools let you know how long people stay?
It'll give you an average watch time. It's very hard to break down. You can't break down, to my knowledge, to specific users. Someone else here might know if that's possible. To my knowledge, you can't, but it gives you an average watch time. It can also evidence the peaks and troughs of that, say 20 minutes, or an hour show, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks. There's another question here, which is live streaming requires really highly technical equipment for some people. How do you do it if your church can't afford that? I mean, are there really low budget ways of kind of doing this?
Yeah, there really are. If you're live streaming and you're on a simple setup, I guess it's taking what simple things you have and making it work to be able to do something. You can do it from a phone. You can buy a very simple microphone to plug into a phone, like a Shure mic or something like that. Very simple setup, and you can buy from Amazon again, or equivalent other websites available, platform to put a phone on and do it. That's one way of going about it, or an iPad or something as simple as that. And the other question is if you've not got the resource and that's actually going to be a barrier to things, is it actually better to do something pre-recorded, actually, and still create something which is going to bless people and assist them, than not do it in person? Again, we just before, maybe a year before lockdown, we started broadcasting our evening talk, Just Talk. So we had a camera already ready to use. So it was a case of us then thinking, okay, how do we leverage this best when COVID restrictions came into place? But I think gear shouldn't be a barrier for you. We all have these things in our pockets which allow us to do it. And even if it's just that, and the good news as well is I think a lot of people are very forgiving of that side of things. The biggest element I would say is just the audio quality, if possible. If you can buy a simple plug-in microphone for an iPhone or an iPad or equivalent Android tablet or phones, start there with a simple setup.
That's a really useful tip. So a really good mic or having an external mic really helps, rather than just using the internal one. That's really helpful. Ben, do you mind me saying as well, just another point, another idea is if you're unable to video and do something like that and that bamboozles you, totally understand that. One thing could be that you actually record, say, the service itself, the whole thing
audio only. So particularly the talk, yes, it's lovely to share in communal worship with our brothers and sisters, but I guess you can find other things in terms of facilitating a worship period and then still have to talk, which is maybe unique to what your church journey is going on. So that, again, you can record that using a mobile phone device and actually just upload that for free to Anchor FM and have it as a podcast or something for your church.
That's a really helpful. That's really even I can do that. So that's really useful. There's a couple of other questions in the remaining minutes we have together. I like this one. What about the vicar who thinks his tech team have Yoda-like powers, so he expects to do live in church, on Zoom, on Facebook services of BBC quality? Any pastoral advice for that obviously very real situation for someone listening today?
Firstly, I'm enjoying the Yoda Star Wars reference. Maybe advocating that you might be the last of the Jedis. I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think actually just as much as possible transparency in terms of skill sets and expectations and managing that is really important. Understanding these things. It's something I've had to do as a supposed communications professional. I sit down with my team and say, guys, I love your vision. I love your ideas. I would love to do this. You need 6 of me to do this. So here's the reality. Let's draw down what's the most important thing and work from there and find out what is that most important thing. And that comes back to what I said at the start in terms of audience. Who is this for? Who are we serving? And actually building it up. But I think it just takes transparency and hopefully a lot of grace along the way.
Yeah, some honesty.
Sing our faith.
There's a final question, which it's just more about relationships than a technical aspect, but I think it's a really important one. Is that how are you connecting and building relationship with people who can only join online and are unable to make it into your building? It's fascinating to hear your thoughts on those who may have come to faith or joined you during lockdown and are remaining in that capacity only.
Yeah, great question. So, we really, we've got a thriving network of home group communities, which currently, in the most part, still meeting on Zoom and things. So our kind of filter would be, if you're new here, welcome, we'd love to meet you. So then we have a newcomers thing every couple of months. It's now in person as well as online, but people can meet online, hear about the vision of the church and what we're all about. And then they're invited to join a community group, which they'll be put into, and hopefully they'll feel really welcomed and be a part of that. So there's that context. So they can be a part of community and they can then still engage in terms of a Sunday, which is, to be fair, more of a broadcast rather than a participatory type thing. So putting that mechanism is in place has been really important for us. We've also done online alpha, which has been incredible. We've seen quite a few people come to faith, and since actually when we're able to start to come along to the church. So I understand that for some, it'll be maybe a very long time, if ever, that they come back, but they still want to connect. And I think actually having that hybrid model, whereby, I think there's a lot more patience and opportunity now to say, okay, the reality is I've got a wife and young children. For us both to be able to go along to community together, actually being on Zoom is actually really quite convenient. So actually saying, well, let's adapt for this season. It might be that you have an in-person social every now and then when you can, but actually making relationship the priority is the primary thing for me. How it's done is then well, I guess endorses that fact, but it's all about what can be done to facilitate and make that relationship and those connections as healthy as possible.
Yeah. Ben, I think that's probably our time up, just because we've got some other guests that we'd love to hear. Thank you so much for the richness of that.
Ben, can I just
something else at the end?
Yeah, final thing, just thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. And if anyone has got any questions for me or the network and the collective, feel free to join. And just to say a big thank you to CTEA and Hope for putting this together. I think you guys said this is what it's all about, the collaborative learning and coming together this season. So yeah, kudos to you guys and bless you in what you're doing.
Cheers, Ben. We really appreciate your time, and great to hear your experience, but also your wisdom and some of your comms skills coming in there. Brilliant. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel Jordan Wolf, who's going to take it over from here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben. That was brilliant. Was really great to hear from Ben and Ben. It's the Ben and Ben team. Fantastic. I would love to introduce to you Wale. Wale is a church leader and has planted 2 churches, one in Leicester, one in London, called Imprint. And what I love about one of the reasons we've got Wale with us today is, if you like, I think I asked him a question about why is online important, and almost because Wale lives in digital native land, I think it might have been asking, like, why do people breathe? And so Wale's here to help us, if you like, to get as immersed as we can into digital natives, and why when it comes to mission to a new generation, this is so vitally important, so that we are not tempted to just switch off and try to go back, but to really embrace what God is calling his church to. Wale, thank you and welcome so much.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about where you are. I've done a little bit of an introduction, and how the last year has been for you.
Yeah, so I am actually currently based in Shoreditch. I am leading our church plant in London, which is in Bank, so maybe just a mile away. And the last year has been crazy. It's been crazy for everyone and everybody. But I think especially in terms of just like leading a community, it's one of those things where I just really, myself and my team has really just had to step out in faith. And one of the things we've had to step out in faith is literally in terms of our online platform and actually actively engaging with people online, and what does discipleship look like online. And I guess with everyone, we've been a year in the game and we've made some mistakes, but we've also had some great wins that hopefully I'll be able to share more about later on.
Great, thank you so much. So you said something about, you've really had to make more of online. What have you done over this last year? Where have you stretched? Where have you grown? Maybe where did you start from, and what's God pushed you into as you've gone through this year?
Yeah, it's really interesting because as a community, we really felt like the Lord was really putting it on our hearts to be online, to have a strong online platform. But I guess we naturally prioritized other things, as many churches do. But literally, the lockdown, the pandemic literally forced us to move everything online. So I think it's actually easier to say, what don't we do online? Because we literally moved everything. So like, for example, one of the first things we did was we moved all of our small groups online. Our small groups normally meet centrally around the Bank area, if you know London. And we had to just move all of them online, and we actively had to send out emails to see who would be willing to be small group online leaders and stuff. And as well, moving our church services online. But something that we actually created lots of different discipleship schools. So we did discipleship schools on theology, we did discipleship schools on hearing God, in terms of mental health, even in terms of finance, because we know quite a lot of people were hit by the pandemic and the financial pressures of that. So there's a lot that we did in terms of online.
Tell us, what is a discipleship school? For those who I'm fascinated by that, because what a great idea. Because actually during the pandemic, deepening people's discipleship has been actually a real challenge. Finding a way to do that online, brilliant. Tell us a little bit more. What does a discipleship school look like online?
Yeah, so we normally try to find like an expert, mostly from our community in a particular field. So let's say there was an expert in finance. We're blessed to have some people who work for different consultancy firms and stuff, who basically were just giving people proactive advice when it came to their financial situation. The one that was specifically popular was Hearing God. And we just really went through leaders each week went through scriptures and taught practicalities in terms of hearing God. And we just found so much engagement with that, because especially lockdown created space where people were reevaluating their lives, or they're reevaluating their current relationship with the Lord. And it almost became that desperation to really hear the Lord and to really seek the Lord. And it was just such a great blessing, because a lot of people really found it so useful, and are actively asking, we need more because I want my friends to do this. I want my family members to do this as well.
And what were you doing? Were you doing was it like this? Was it a Zoom? What did you use practically to do that?
Yeah, so practically it was Zoom. Literally, like how Rachel and I are talking now, it was literally a Zoom link that we'll send once a week. That would do the main teaching, and so the main teaching was on a Monday night, and on Friday, there were different groups that would basically really depict and really break down what the Monday conversation was about, where people could ask specific questions, talk about the implications, talk about maybe their fears and worries and stuff, and how to actually make this practical in their context and in their situations. And we felt that was really helpful to have a session where it's practicality, but also a session where people can be in smaller groups asking those tough questions and figuring it out.
Right. Did that do anything to blend your London and your Leicester churches? Because I know you.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. It was really great because I was leading Imprint Leicester, and I guess just before the pandemic, I moved down to London to start Imprint Church London, and I think we were only going for like 6 months before lockdown came. So it was crazy, but also beautiful is that literally we have a whole community in London and a whole community in Leicester, and it was just so great for them to engage. So we did our services together. The only thing we didn't do together was our online small groups, but we did our discipleship groups together, even our online socials. So after the service, we would have post-church mingle. and there would be like an online game master who would basically split people into different breakout groups to do like different online games. And it was also a really cool way to engage with new people who perhaps just watched our YouTube link or watched the service online, to actually meet people proactively from the community, even though it was just like a 2D version of them.
Yeah. And I know you did. Were there other things that you did that you wouldn't have done if it hadn't been for the pandemic? I think you did some specific creative projects, didn't you, as a group?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, so we did 2 films actually. So we our first film was called Lockdown. Creative.
Great title. Yeah.
And that was really interesting because we started receiving a lot of prayer requests, and a lot of people were talking about just the frustrations and some of the difficulties in terms of being locked down with their families and with their friends and with their housemates and stuff, and some of the frictions that were happening in people's relationships. So we basically decided to do like a short film, like a short drama piece. We literally rented out like an Airbnb and got different people from our community to act. And we basically just depicted this story of a single mother who had teenager kids. He was trying to address some of her own issues while still be there for her family, and some of those tensions, and how God was in all of that, and how they were forgiven, and how even though they were annoyed, how they showed grace. And I really feel like it was just such a great visual representation of what we could even do in our own context and stuff. And it really resonated with a lot of people, and a lot of people were really grateful that we did it and stuff. And we also did another one called Emotions, that really just talked about, the whole year of 2020. And it was another drama that showcased a therapist interviewing someone else about their 2020 experience. And, 2020 was crazy. Obviously, there was coronavirus, the racial injustice. And this actress articulating her fears and frustrations, perhaps even her mistrust in the Lord, really resonated with a lot of people. And people actively shared it to their friends. And they were like, God was in this person's brokenness, perhaps God can meet us too.
Where are those films if people want to find them?
Yeah, so it's on Imprint TV. I think it's one of like the main links on YouTube. You type in Imprint TV motions or Imprint TV lockdown.
Great.
You find this.
Now you said people shared them with their friends. How did this help with mission? So how did all this focus online? Did it help you missionally reach particularly that generation? Reach your generation?
Really did. It really did. And I think we're literally in a time where for entertainment, everyone was online. And I think it got to a time where people were bored of Netflix, people were bored of Amazon Prime, people were bored of BritBox and stuff.
I watched it all. They watched every cocktail available at some stage.
Yeah, they watched it all. And I think actively, there was people in our community, like, a lot of people were deeply moved, like literally like weeping as they were watching it. And they were just saying, my friends need to see this. My family needs to see this. So actively, even people got the whole family, they would watch it and then they'll get the whole family to come and watch it. And then, their moms might share it to someone else and their friends will share it to someone else. And it was so powerful in terms of mission because we actively did a prayer Zoom afterwards if people wanted prayer for some of the things that resonated in the film. And we're able to like pray for some new people. And even, some new people came to our community through that as well.
Great. And now, have you begun to open back up church? Is that going to happen? What's the vision to do? Because, I mean, obviously online is so important for your generation. You actually have kind of way flourished there. How do you think you might do online and offline? What's your vision as a church for that?
Yeah, so we will always be online. Like we're not going back. And online has actually grown our church. Like it's maybe grown our church by 25%. We just need to hear that again, don't we, Wale?
Yeah. It's grown your church by 25%. By
25%, yeah.
And I don't know if there would be anything else that you could have done in a year that could have grown your church by 25%.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And what age bracket is that 25% growth?
Yeah, so a lot of young professionals and working professionals, but we've actually seen a lot of growth in terms of, like, for example, my parents' generation, which would be like in their 50s or 60s and stuff, just because their kids are literally really getting involved in church and they're like, what is happening to you? You've changed at home and you're nicer. So you feel like I need to know. And so especially in the last few months, I've been praying a lot for people's parents and I've been having sessions with them and stuff. So it's been great.
So you're staying online, but are you going back into physical meets? How do you think you might do those two things together?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's like, I think, like I said, because we have, I guess, a mixture of demographic, actively is, if anything, it's actually an older generation who, like I said, my parents' generation and above, who feel more comfortable watching church online. And I think it's one of our ways to literally practically be inclusive as a church. So practically, we will always have our cameras set up. We will always record our services. We'll always have someone online, maybe in the chat, to engage with them and stuff. And and we have we also have specifically an online prayer team. So in our in-person services, we'll always have a team who would pray for people, but we also have that online as well, and where people can log into a Zoom link and they'll be sent to a breakout. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, it's just so exciting to hear, particularly that 25% figure. If people have got any questions for Wale, do pop those into Slido and we'll ask Wale as we go on. If people are there, so I'm hoping that everybody here is really convinced about the power of online. What would you say about if people perhaps are from a different generation trying to understand your generation, about the importance of online? Is there anything you can help us with around that?
So could you repeat your question again?
Yeah, so I think it is, how important is online to your generation? Because that might help people of a different just to understand why online is important. How does it influence their lives? How much time do you think they're spending online? How do they communicate with each other? Some of that, which just might help unpack the importance of it.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Like something we've been doing in our church is that sometimes we challenge people and we say, how much time have you spent on your phone? And I think iPhone have it and Androids have it, like the digital well-being. And some people's figures are crazy, like 12 hours. And, they're not spending 12 hours reading their Bible. So, like they're not on the Bible app, they're on a form of entertainment software and stuff. And I feel like online is literally another way. As churches, we're meant to disciple people. We're meant to help people grow in the knowledge of Jesus and in the obedience of God and stuff. And online is, I personally feel like it's the best way of doing that. And it is the most efficient and this is the most efficient way of doing that. So we literally do a lot of our Bible teachings. We release it online and we do like short videos that engages with people. We do some of our prayer meetings online, our worship meetings online. And this is just really taking the mission of Jesus really seriously, that we're called to disciple people. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, or was there something you wanted me to touch on?
I'm going to give you I know that's really helpful. It's really helpful because it's just getting into our heads how important this world is. We've got a question about people. They're really fascinated by the fact that you said that some of the 50 to 60-year-olds who are more comfortable with services online. Did they previously go to this question? Did they previously go to church, or is this new to them? Or what's your insight on that? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think just because we had our church is literally in Bank, so naturally, just because of the area, there's so many young working professionals. I think there was almost like this myth that, perhaps it's not relevant for me, perhaps they won't understand me and stuff. But I think by people first tuning in online and seeing that, wow, there's actually so much more to this. The Lord is really speaking to me through this service. It's made a lot of that generation really engaged, and even some of them practically come into church. So I feel like online is kind of like a shop window where you basically peek through to see if there's anything you like or anything that stands out to you. And I feel like especially that's the power of being online. Most of us would not enter a shop that was black and tinted and you couldn't see through the windows. And, unfortunately, it's kind of like that with our churches sometimes. We expect people to come and they have no idea what it looks like. And I just want to share a quick story. I remember when we first planted into London, we sent a team beforehand to start a small group. And the person who was sent on with the main team was it's our creative director, and he's an amazing graphic designer. And he designed amazing posters saying this is going to be our concept. We're going to be talking about, let me just say, the fruits of the Spirit. He will do an amazing artwork and all of that. But the community wasn't growing and the small group wasn't growing. And the team said to me, they said, why isn't our small group growing? We're posting all these pictures online, but we're not growing. And I said, you guys are posting graphic pictures, but you're not posting what you do. And I said, from now on, just post what you do, even if you're just laughing with a friend. Post a picture of you laughing with a friend, or even if it's just you eating some food. Post a picture of you eating food with your community. And if you're reading some scripture or there's a testimony, just post some videos. Help to see people what you do and what you look like. And immediately when they did that, the attendance shot up, and people literally would come to the first sessions and be like, I recognized you from Instagram, I recognized you from online. So it is kind of that shop window thing. Like, it is essential that as churches we do take it seriously.
Great. Well, just a couple of things here, but I think we could just sort of, we're going to wind up in a minute. You do have a physical location as well as online, don't you?
Yes.
You did pre-pandemic, you were meeting physically, and you are going to carry on now with that hybrid of physical and online.
So we do that now, yeah.
Yeah, and have you found people have come back into the building as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like, we've met people who literally said, I've been with you online for the last year, and I never knew who they were. It was my first time meeting them, so it was great.
Yeah, and they've turned up to your physical meet. They've turned up to that church building as a result. Definitely. Almost having that see-through glass, able to see you and find out and get involved online. They've come offline, which is really exciting. And another person has pointed about middle-aged and older people also find online powerful, and that's what you've said, isn't it, about your parents' generation and older people who've actually also found online a really useful way to get engaged.
Yeah.
Wale, we're so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for being with us and for inspiring us with the story and journey that Imprint Church has been on and inspiring us to stay online. We are so grateful to you. Thank you, Wale. And I'm now handing over to Rachel, the other Rachel Heffer, the other Rachel. It was the Ben, now Rachel. Thanks so much, Wale. See you soon.
Brilliant. So I'll just add my thanks to Rachel as well. That was fascinating to hear about. Our third guest, which is our Rev Richard Battersby. I feel like we're taking quite a turn from going from the south to the north, from London right up to Richard. I believe you're in Wetherby, York. You can tell us a little bit in just a moment where you are. Well, go on. Tell us, whereabouts in the country are you?
Well, I look after about 20 square miles of land that sits in the rural hinterland between York, Wetherby, Harrogate, Leeds. I was parachuted in here 4 years ago by Archbishop Sentamu and said, let's see if we can make rural church really work. Here's a bishop's mission order, go for it. Serving 7 communities with no more than 500 people in each community, 5 church buildings. Just how do we build church in this physical environment where people are geographically dispersed, where you find little micro communities here and there? How do we build a sustainable church? And that was the challenge.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're the right man for the right job in the right place. Quite different to what we just heard from Wale there about being London-based, young adults, and obviously people of other generation, other ages as well, digital natives, on phones, as you said, up to 6, 8, 12 hours a day. From what I understand, I mean, what we wanted to draw out your story, which I'm fascinated to hear, is, as you've just said, very rural, dispersed community, maybe not much Wi-Fi or connectivity. Tell us just a little bit, first of all, what pre-pandemic, so pre-COVID, casting our minds back, what did the worshipping community look like then? You've started to tell us about rural, dispersed. What did that pattern look like on a week-to-week basis pre-COVID?
Yeah, well, one of the first things that I had to do when I was here is change a lot, change the worship patterns. We've got a lot of migration into these communities from young professional families that are moving in because it's commutable distance to some of the larger cities in the area. So we'd already changed the worship significantly. But what we were doing was effectively running around every Sunday, trying to suit everybody, moving between village, 3-4 services a day, from the traditional to the messy church, to the breakfast church, to the more contemplative contemporary services in the evening. And we were really working so hard. The church numbers had really grown. We'd sort of doubled in our worshipping community size, if not tripled in other places. And everything was going great until 2020 started. And then obviously the pandemic. But by the time we reached the pandemic, we were motoring, doing so much. And then we had to rethink in a big way.
I'm sure. By the sounds of it, motoring and yet exhausted by the sounds of that. So lockdown hits March 2020. We crash into lockdown around the country. As you said, for you, for so many other church leaders and ministry leaders, it took a lot of re-navigating the times. And I remember myself, it seemed almost a 3-week pattern of new guidelines come out. We try and be agile and we respond and we get online, all the rest of it. Tell us a little bit about what did that look like for you then across those parishes? What did you do? How did you see other people responding?
Well, straight away we did two things. We adopted Zoom, and we taught all our congregation, from the young to the old, how to use Zoom, knocking on windows, through the windows saying press this button and everything else. And so we found that we kept the majority of our congregation. Most were online anyway. We also, as well as on a Sunday morning, on the day that Boris announced lockdown in that day of March, we started morning and evening prayer on Zoom. And straight away, we had some 30 plus people joining, not all at the same time, but they became, it was almost new monastic in the way that we have people still now joining at 8 a.m. contemporary prayer, 6 p.m. contemporary prayer. And that has created prayer, just a bookend to the day for many people, praying together. And that's been remarkable. But that also has changed the way in which we were as a church, because the result of those prayers was that God has blessed and anointed our church in many different ways. Sunday mornings became, well, we're on Zoom, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. We're trying to extend our reach as much as possible. We provide a contemporary form of worship using many different styles of preaching that can appeal to different learning styles. And videos and everything else. So we made a huge change as to what we were as a church, but very conscious also that our church walls, and I look upon it, what were the barriers to us being a thriving church before lockdown? And those two barriers were geography and also the perception of church in a village. So in a village, you'd have some people that went to church, some people that didn't. Some people that didn't want to walk up the hill and sit in a freezing cold church, or travel 10 miles on back roads to find the church, to be part of a worshiping community. But those barriers were removed, and we were able to show not only to the existing congregation, but to the wider community, the wider Facebook groups. Because when we go live on a Sunday morning on Facebook, we're both on Zoom, but broadcasting live. We take that feed and put it on all the community websites as well, all the community Facebook pages, so people who may not have had an interest in church can look in with a huge degree of anonymity and say, actually, that's not what I thought. This is different. This can be for me. So we're really clear that we are now a church with glass walls. We don't just have a typical Anglican service with a camera on the vicar all the time. It is a service with lots of PowerPoint slides and using those inventively, as I've said, using different forms of preaching. And we've been doing text God sermons recently, where a text conversation goes on between God and ourselves about things like faith and all of that. So yeah, just a huge amount of change.
Absolutely. Lots of initiative taking, lots of energy as well invested by the sounds of it over the last year. Love what you said there about sort of just that, the expansive nature of having glass walls, like you said, people in the community being able to see in, and quashing maybe some of the preconceptions of church. And it's lowered the threshold, hasn't it, for so many people to have that entry point.
Absolutely.
What would you say? So now, obviously, as we were saying, the rehabilitation, re-emerging, if you like, in-person church being able to happen again. What are you doing now? What does that look like for the future then? And again, in your communication across those different parishes, are you going to keep some of that joined up online, the hybrid presence? Are people wanting to become separate again and meet in their individual churches? What happens now? What's in the plan?
Well, when I was reflecting on the other speakers, which have been great this afternoon, I was thinking that before we went into lockdown and everything, I was the person hovering over all the villages, running around and being that church, the present person across all villages. What we've seen is that everybody's been elevated to that position because they can join in despite where they live. And their affinity is not to the local church building now. It is to a church family based on relationships and fellowship. We started small groups and they've been real. So the church won't let me, and this is fantastic, won't let me go back to the way we were. So on a Sunday morning now, I'm not dashing between buildings. I'm doing one church service in one building, and we go around each of the 5 churches in rotation. And that church building becomes basically an extended front room. So we may get 30 people. These are small churches. We may get 30 people join us in the church building, but there's a screen at the front and they can see those that are joining on Zoom. I've got a monitor, so I can relate both to the congregation and also the people on Zoom. And we've got WhatsApp groups telling me what's going on Facebook and things like this. So we can become a church that meets once together every Sunday. And this has changed people's, during lockdown, it changed people's church-going behaviour, in that people would only ever attend the service when it was in their village. And I couldn't get to every village every Sunday, but now people come every Sunday. So we've seen both a growing of our congregation, because we've transcended the physical geographical barriers. So our congregation has grown now, and we've got people coming. Well, there's some from Ely, your part of the world, I believe, but also people from Manchester. Those people with an affinity or a relationship with the church still join online, will never join us physically. So we've seen both a deepening, but also an expansion of what we are as a church.
Brilliant. Can I ask you a really practical question, just from what you've said there? You said in doing the online service, you, with your own monitor laptop in front of you, you can see that interaction of those who are engaging on Zoom online with you, whilst you're also greeting and speaking to those in front of you in the in-person presence in the building. Yeah. We've also heard just earlier about the option of having not necessarily that coming from the front, the person speaking, but having an online host, if you like, or hosts that could be greeting those online. What are the benefits, pros or cons, do you think? Is it just an individual thing as to how you want to engage? It sounds quite busy almost, in the sense of how are you fully present with those in front of you, but also online? How have you made that work? And what would your top tips for anyone who was thinking, that sounds great, I need to do it, but how?
Well, we have somebody who welcomes people on Facebook, who keeps a conversation going on the Facebook feed. There is a technical thing in terms of who's running the technology, and usually somebody other than me runs the technology if I'm leading worship. But also, I think I make it interactive. We have about 70 or 80 people now who will, regardless of where they are there physically or whether they're there online, they will contribute to the readings, to the prayers. They will be the interaction in the sermon and in the reflection. We did a Dragon's Den style reflection last week, and I was the person in the middle talking about God, and people were asking the sort of the Dragon's Den type questions on both online and in church. So I think that the interaction is really important, and that works. But also, it's the organic growth for people to get used to working in that way as well. And the encouragement from the leader.
So I'm sure from what you said, actually, some of that just takes practice, probably, doesn't it, as to how to actually interact, to be reading stuff that's coming up in the chat or the comments and engaging in person as well. I love the comment there in the chat from Stephen saying he uses youth as online hosts. And again, it's a great idea, isn't it, to use young people who, again, digital natives, use those who could be really well encouraged and mobilised to help in that way. But I love what you're saying about actually encouraging that interaction. So there's a seamlessness, hopefully, that would build over time of those present with you interacting, but also those online as well. What would you say have been the main challenges, or again looking ahead, what's the main challenge that you perceive moving forward?
I've got one church that's a quarter of a mile outside of a village in the field. It's got no electricity, and I couldn't exclude that church when we went back online. So I've got a couple of things that we use for this church. I use this, which is an online. It's a lithium battery generator that can run a laptop. It can run a projector. It's there. It brings electricity in the building, as opposed to spending a lot of money in getting a live electricity feed. And we use this little box here, which is a wonderful sort of mobile Wi-Fi hotspot, and that has been fantastic in getting Wi-Fi into each of our church buildings, and it works everywhere. Obviously, if anybody wanted to look at this, they need to be tested, but that's been just as a reliable signal than the shaky Wi-Fi in the vicarage. So we use that, and we are there in every church now. It's fantastic. there was a wonderful service that we had. The first time we used this technology, we were in this church with no electricity, and one of our church family, he works in Africa an awful lot of the time, and he led prayers from the Congo in our church in the middle of Yorkshire in a field with no electricity, and it was amazing to see his face and his voice coming through on screen, leading prayers from another part of the world.
I mean, that really is an example to me of can-do mentality, isn't it, of overcoming obstacles. Really brilliant to hear that, and to be shown examples of what you can use in that context. Given that, for any of our church leaders or again ministries who are watching and online with us now today, feeling that this does feel, at times a bit of an unsurmountable problem, or there's not so much a problem, but there's challenges. Again, from taking almost that to me seems an extreme, no power, no Wi-Fi, and yet being able to find a way forward. Again, just knowing the heart of church leaders, the busyness, everything that we've gone through over the last year, the weariness as well. What would your sort of 2 or 3 notes of encouragement be that would just be, again, that sense of can do, we're in it together, but what does that look like, do you think?
Well, for me, the centre of all of this is when I turn on my Zoom feed at 8 a.m. in the morning and there are people there to pray with me. When I turn it on again at 6 p.m. in the afternoon, there are people there to pray with me. And that's given me, that's helped with my well-being through a very difficult time. But actually, it has put centre stage what we should do as church leaders, and that is pray regularly with our church family. And that has paid huge dividends, both in the spiritual deepening of everybody's relationship with God, but also the well-being for individuals. I think also we should look at the barriers that we're overcoming, not the barriers we're facing. And I think of the woman who would never have seen anybody in lockdown because she was isolating in her house for a year. I think of the cancer victim who could never get out of the house, who joins us regularly and never able to do that. I think of the couple who were stuck in a high-rise in Manchester who joined our church family. And all of these, it's about looking at the blessings, not the barriers.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good perspective. Absolutely the right way to look at it. So given that and some of those people you've just mentioned, the good news stories, and, we praise God for you, Richard, for your, initiative, the innovations that you've taken. Is this a long-term thing for you then for the way forward?
Well, actually, again, when I was reflecting on the growth of our mission here that we saw pre-COVID, I was getting to a point thinking, where are we going to go next? And during COVID, God has blessed us and we've seen more exponential growth. Now, when we come out of this, actually, we're looking at planting a new church now, given the strength of what we are, using hopefully a local venue, because we've tapped into the people who disenfranchised from church buildings and sort of the liturgical church, the Church of England can be, and are looking for new worship experiences. So I think that's opened our eyes, and we're going to build on the connections that we've made because of our glass wall church, and also do something more physical now for those church members, at the same time keeping going in the same way that we are. I mean, who would have said, if God had said to me a year ago, okay, you'll have regular prayer with loads of people, you'll see everybody attend church every week, you'll see a growth in church, you'll have small groups, I would have said, go away, God, no. And then we then just got the confidence to go out and create something new on the back of the newness that we have seen in the last year.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been said many times, despite the challenges that we face, and of course against the devastating backdrop, none of this has been a surprise to God, has it? And certainly He's, the Holy Spirit has been powerfully at work in so many places, mobilizing His church to move forward, despite the challenges that have come with it. But yeah, like you said, just lots of opportunity and potential moving forward. So, Richard, I think we'll leave it there. People in the chat and on Slido have asked if you could share the boom box and the Wi-Fi unit, if that was possible to get those details. We could send them out on email as well.
Send them through, definitely.
That would be brilliant. Thank you. Really practical equipping for some people. But bless you. Thanks so much for all you've shared, and amazing, really encouraging stories of just what you've been able to achieve in the rural ministry, rural community as well. So thank you so much for your time and sharing that with us today. And back over to Ben, if that's all right. Thanks, Richard.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. I've been really encouraged by everyone today. It's been really, really moving, actually, to hear how God's been at work in such different contexts, from urban London with young professionals through to rural contexts and Ben's work at the Well. There are just one or two questions that are like technical things that might be really helpful just to get answered, because people have asked them specifically. One is from Karen in Wales, and maybe Ben, who's probably, I don't know, or Richard, maybe Richard could answer this too. You can fight it out between you. She said that they've YouTube live stream funerals, weddings using a laptop with a separate camera and a mic, but the home experience is very bad for sound and PowerPoint links. Have you got any suggestions how you might improve that? And it's a really specific technical question, but I guess there are probably others with us today who might have also struggled with that.
My top tip is,
Richard, you tell us what your top tip is.
Just go for a more expensive webcam. We've successfully broadcast occasional offices, but it is just using a better webcam than just the £30 webcams you can buy. Look at the sound settings on Zoom as well. Be careful with those. There needs to be just care with that.
Brilliant. So it's a bit of an upgrade in some of your tech will help you. Ben, have you got anything you want to add to that very specific question, or Ben, Elliot? Maybe Ben's not actually there. Another question is, has anyone got links to an idiot's guide to technology of integrating an in-live person service with a concurrent two-way Zoom service as one blended service, please? So if anyone has any, Richard, have you got a tip there?
I've got a picture that shows that. I can, a one picture that shows that. We use Restream, but there are other devices to take a Zoom link and put it into YouTube and Facebook. But yeah,
brilliant. What we'll do, I think, probably best is that if you send us some of your tech stuff and some of those bits of information, we'll email it out to all the participants later on this week as a kind of follow-up. That's great. There's a one from Elaine, actually, where online can we see what Richard's churches have been doing so that we can show other people in our parishes? Is there anything that you can point us to, Richard, on YouTube or some other?
Just look at our website, our Facebook page, Rural Ainsley Parish. But if anybody wants to contact me directly, I'm more than happy to be in touch.
That's great. Thanks, Richard. Okay. Well, I think what I've heard today that seemed to crop up in all our speakers is this idea of the glass house, this kind of idea of revealing. I mean, one of the things I've been reflecting on during COVID is that it's been a time of kind of apocalyptic time, which is really like a breaking open of what's really happening and allowing people to see inside our churches for the first time. I was struck by Wale saying that we expect people to come into our churches, but they've got no idea about what that's going to look like. And going online has given people an opportunity to peer in. Richard said that it kind of gives this sense of it's an anonymity of church, that you can come and you can have a look without having to commit and decide whether actually this is something you want to be part of. And in fact, experiencing God's Holy Spirit in that peering in and being drawn into the community is a really, really encouraging thing. So I want to thank all our speakers for what they've shared today. And I'm going away feeling really encouraged by the creativity and the work of God's Spirit breathing life into places where we've seen so much death, haven't we, in the past 15 months. It's great to hear stories of life and hope. I'm going to hand back over to Richard. I know there are a few questions coming through, but we'll try and deal with those at another point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so where that brings us to almost to a point of drawing things to a close. Really hope that through the stories that have been shared that you do not altogether come away with loads more questions, although, as we said, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to feed those into us, we can filter those out to different people to help to respond to those. But just as we draw things together, again, just echoing what Ben said, hopefully for so many of you, you've been encouraged by the fact that actually going online has lowered that threshold. You're seeing new people being able to connect with, or indeed people in your own community, just engage with online church in a new way. Really hope that we've started to scratch the surface of some of those technical, detailed bits, as we said from last time, people interested in the cameras, the ways in which to fully do blended, and looking at some of the really practical dummies guide to, we realise that we're just edging into this, as the title of this webinar would suggest, but would love to keep on journeying this together. So just a little reminder to say, this webinar has been recorded. We'll put it on the Evangelical Alliance, the Hope, the CTE websites. If you wanted to watch it again, pass on to others, then that will be live as a recording, broken down in different chunks of the different speakers in the next week or so. So hopefully that will serve you well. And just a reminder, as Ben said right at the beginning, because of just what we perceive to be the timeliness of this conversation and wanting to journey with you, we've put the date of Thursday, 22nd of July, again at 2 p.m. in the diary for part 3, where we'll take a particular look, maybe some of the research that Rachel mentioned, but also actually how in a hybrid church context can we still be really sharp and honed in terms of mission evangelism whilst engaging with people online. So do join us for that if you want to put the 22nd of July in your diary. But lastly, I'm just going to hand back to Rachel, who I think is going to just wrap up and pray for us as we go this afternoon. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. We will definitely, the whole webinar will be on YouTube so that you can find it, and please do share it with others that you think it would be useful with. That's what's happened to the first webinar. That is the joy of online. We're loving working together. We're going to carry on doing that, as you've heard. I'm super excited about the research that's going on right now, which is giving us a deeper dive into what people are thinking and feeling and what's happening around online. So we'll share that with you in the next one. And if you're looking for something that might help you with ongoing services right now, the one thing I'd want to mention is the wellbeingjourney.org. There are 8 amazing filmed sessions there that would help people with their well-being, which we know is a big key issue right now, designed in a way that, yes, you can use it for church, but it can go further out into community. So if you haven't seen the Wellbeing Journey, it's just timely as we all grapple with what happened last year. I feel it's a really something the church can use, and it's because it's pre-recorded. You can put it on as a Zoom course. You can put it into your services. So that's the one thing I'd love to mention from Hope. So please have a little look at that, because I think it's key issues that we all need to deal with. So thank you so much for being with us. It's been great to deal with all these issues. Ask any questions. We'll put all of the information up on our websites. We'll get that page from Richard that sounded amazing on how to do that, how to integrate your online and your in-person service for you, so that's up on a website as well. We've got a page on the Hope Together website. I'm sure the others have as well. And I'm just going to pray for us as we close. Oh, Father God, thank you so much for this afternoon. Thank you for the inspiration of the stories that we've heard. Thank you so much for the people who have come to faith and joined our family because we have gone online. Thank you for all the churches that you've helped up and down this country to do this, to have a go. Lord, help us as we go into this next phase of both being online and offline together. Help us to do that well, so that new people might come and join us, find out about you, Jesus, and might see what church is really like, because we've become a glass house. We've become visible, and people can find the light and life of Jesus shining out through all we do. And I pray a blessing on everyone here this afternoon in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So thank you so much. We'll say goodbye and God bless. All the best for this next season, and we'll see you again very soon, we hope.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Great to see you. Bye.